Hello, YouTube, and welcome to Guiding Principles Bible Study for Friday night. I'm Twana with Destiny Education, and I am going to be your host. Let me ask you something. Do you often find yourself questioning whether or not the Bible was actually correct in claiming that the earth and everything we see and all of its inhabitants were created within 7 literal days? Do you often find yourself wondering if it is at all possible for that to have happened? Well, I am happy to be here tonight to talk to you about that because one of the biggest struggles that we have when it comes to understanding the Bible is being able to really look at the Bible within context, right? And so let's explain first what makes it so hard for people to believe that the Bible was 7 literal days. It's actually really simple. We live in the physical realm. And in this world that we live in, that we inhabit, that we experience day in and day out, guess what? It is really hard to get a whole lot done really fast. But God doesn't live in our world. He lives outside of our world. Therefore, for him, things are nowhere near as complicated. And we're going to go more in depth into that into another study. But for tonight, I really want to shift gears. Because here's the thing that we don't understand about 7 literal days. It means that here's what it means about 7 literal days. Remember that everything in your life attests to the creation attests to the Bible, to what the Bible says, okay? And so what happens is that we see in our world the things that the Bible tells us are in there. So let me give you an example because this was really exciting to go through and wonderful to see today. And here's what was going on. I was reading through some stuff and I was working and getting prepared for tonight. And I started looking up the laws of the universe because I really wanted to understand how many universal laws there actually were. And in the end, what I discovered was that there are 12. Here's the irony of that. 12 is the number of government. It's the number of tribes that existed in the Old Testament. It's the number of disciples. It's always representing leadership. And when the Bible represents that leadership, it does so because it wants you to understand that there are always leaders, but it wants you to be clear about who your leader is. And so the 12 universal principles that God set into the earth were designed to ensure that every single thing he says in this book can come to pass. So when he says to you, I will rain on the just and the unjust alike, here's what he's saying. I have already woven into the laws of the universe the principle that makes sure if you live by this principle, you are going to be successful. I just love it. And so what ends up happening is that when we start working within the confines of what God has laid out for us within his word, and then we go outside and we start looking at all the different things that he's put into place, guess what happens? Boom, our life starts to open up. Now, some of you who haven't gotten this yet, I get it. Hear me and hear me well. I know that there are times when you are just sitting there and you're like, God, I'm doing it. Like I'm fasting, I'm praying, I'm sitting here. The bills still aren't getting paid. My kids are crazy. My husband is going crazy. My wife is going crazy. I get it. I've been there so many times, sometimes even at this table, let me tell you. But it's because you haven't grasped what the Bible's really saying. You see, because we keep looking at this book as a religious book, what ends up happening is that we think that it's external, that it's not designed to transform what is on the inside of us. When we start looking at this book and saying, okay, God, Help me understand the right questions that I need to ask you. Then we flip this open and we go to Genesis and we start reading. And we find out that God created the heavens and the earth, and that the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. Okay, what does that mean to me? Nothing yet. You got to keep reading. Give it a few more sections, a few more verses, and guess what? It's all of a sudden going to start to make sense. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, and God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. Well, wait a minute, God. If you said, "Let there be light," what does that mean? Like, did you really just say, "Let there be," and there was? Well, yes. But did it happen just because he waved a magic wand? Absolutely not. You see, when you exist outside of the physical realm, your words, your limitations are taken away. In the case of the Father, his limitations are always taken away because he doesn't exist in the finite, very compacted world that we live in. And so what's exciting about that is that as we begin to ask him questions and as we begin to study and as we begin to look at this, we open up our minds and we say, okay, wait a minute. Well, if you said, "Let there be," and there was, then what does that mean in my life? Can I name it and claim it? Not quite. But here's what that means. That means that there is a principle in place that says what you speak, you will receive. You have to be careful what you speak. And I'm going to tell you exactly what I have struggled with because I know so many of us do. As he was walking me on this journey, as he was raising me up to come and sit here and to do these things, one of the things that he showed me was exactly what it means to utilize my words. How does it impact my life? Now listen, there are some people who will try and tell you, you need to speak life over the situation, and the situation is a dead situation. Don't call clean what God has called unclean, and don't call unclean what God has called clean. All right? Don't do that. So here's what happens. When I look at my situation, right? Whatever my situation happens to be, in the case of a colleague of mine, he recently separated from his wife, a woman that he loves. If he comes in and he's saying, "We're not going to be able to make it, we're not going to get it back together, we're not," then what he's doing is he's speaking death over that situation. Because God said what? All things are possible through Christ who strengthens me. I don't have to believe in Christ, but I can see that all things are possible if I walk the way that he has already laid out for me to walk. And so what then happens is that while he is sitting there, if he shifts and he says, "You know what, Tawana? I'm going to get my wife back. I'm going to get my family back. We're going to come back together. I don't know how this is going to happen, but I know that this is going to happen." Now, all of a sudden, his ability to be creative opens up. The same way all of our ability becomes creative. You see, so many times we get caught in thinking we're being realistic. Well, it's realistic that this person has walked away and said that we're never going to be together again. Yeah, they may have said that. But the reality is that when a woman leaves a man, she has a greater chance of going back than when a man leaves a woman. And we'll have to talk about that in a whole nother episode because believe me, that is long and drawn out and it is very, very overwhelming for most people. When you say, "This is what I want," and then you start planting the seeds to make it happen, it's already in here for you to be a success. It's already here. Within the 12 laws of the universe, the 12 universal laws, everything you want to do exists. And all you got to do is pick which ones you want to work in and make them happen. But there are some things that we need to learn with this. Number one, money is always a byproduct of loving people. When you put your effort forward to change people's lives, to impact their lives, money is going to follow. It won't feel like it if you can't figure out how to pay the rent. It's going to feel like, oh, what do I do? This isn't working. It's working. It's a nightmare and it's hard. And you're fearful and you're scared. And those are all normal things to feel. But you got to do it anyway. You have not been set up to fall. God did not set you up to be hurt. We just never took the time to really understand what it was he was telling us to do, how it was he was instructing us, and the things that he really wanted to give us. When I tell you that this is who he is and this is how he sets it up, because religion often tells us that God is so far away that we can't know him. He's mysterious. He works in mysterious ways. No, the rules are what they are. And on this earth, man, sometimes we hurt. We hurt like a son of a gun. Things happen. We watch things fall apart. We see people that we love die regardless of their age, and there is nothing we can do to stop it. And you sit there and you watch these painful things happen and you go, well, if God was there, why didn't he stop it? Because the world is what it is. We have inhabited this world. We have inherited this world for many years, and it is filled with very greedy, very selfish people who do selfish things, but it's equally filled with wonderful people who do wonderful things and who are more than happy to give their time and attention and dedication to those out there who genuinely want to experience something new. We're going to have hard times. We're going to experience tribulation. We're going to hurt. But that doesn't mean that we're at our end. It means that we've got something to overcome and to keep going. Too often we lose sight of that. We have to keep going. When you understand that God is your friend, when you understand that he is for you and you come at every problem from the perspective that God is for you, here's what happens. You begin to expect things to turn around and to be good. You begin to realize that as painful as the situation may be, you're going to be okay. You finally begin to see that, wow, I kind of walked through that with an ease I've never walked through anything before. And it really changes the way that you see the world play out. God is always for you. He is always for you. And there was a time I didn't get that. I did not understand what was happening. And God kept sending these things my way. And I was like, but you told me to do this. I put out fleeces. I checked. I made sure that I wasn't crazy. And y'all, let me tell you, the Father, yeah, he likes to send me on some crazy missions. Like, hey, by the way, I want you to pick up on a Monday and move to a whole different state. Like, these are the things that he does in my life, right? And so when I was younger, when I was still a milk drinker, I was like, I don't get it. What is it that you want me to do? Like, I keep doing it and then these things blow up in my face. But as he began to walk me through and show me what happens when I know he is for me, I stopped blaming things that happened on him. I stopped blaming him on other people. And I said, okay, what do you want to do about this? How do you want this to end? And I started speaking differently. And when I stopped talking about how bad the situation was and started talking about what I wanted to see, things began to change. Does that mean I said, this is how it's going to end? No, every time I tried that, guess what? I got mud on my face. So don't talk that way. He is not a name and claiming God. But what he is someone who says, stand on my principles, and I promise you, that I will bring you to the place of success. And so every single time I stood on his principles, what I began to learn is that everything always worked out. Things began to grow, they began to change, they began to blossom. And before long, there wasn't any need to speak negatively because I was like, oh no, this is going to be fine. Because what happens is that when you get a success under your belt, you start using that as fuel. And then you start running toward the next success. And then it becomes this world where it's like, oh, nothing is outside of my reach. And so once you realize that nothing is outside of your reach, now you're fearless. You are, and people will describe you as, she's fearless. Like she does these things and they don't make sense. Like there's no reason that he would do that. There's no reason she would do that. There's no reason that, but all of a sudden they work out all the time. And the reason is because you're standing on principles and all of them are starting to come together. Principles are a solid foundation. There's nothing sand-like about them. And so that is the gift that God gave us. The gift he created for us to be successful. And when Jesus came and died for us, he was the gateway that ensured that whenever we stood on those principles, they would be the rock foundation that we needed. I'll see you next week.